So June, this was Pride Month, and there was this rather renowned picture of streets of London. I can't remember which one it was. Regent Street, that's the one. Don't know London very well, but yes, yell it from the rooftops. It was Pride Month, and
Colonial occupation by the looks of
I
it.
mean, butt sex month.
yes, it is indeed.
Well, it's not anymore.
And it's not really confined to a month anymore, is it? Because people get things rammed down their throats all times of the year. Double entendre intended. So I'm going to turn to something quite dark. One of the biggest accidents in Indian rail history happened. 288 people killed and 850 people injured in an Indian train derailment. I don't know why that was a tongue twister. Everyone knows how packed an Indian train is, so I imagine this was...
Yeah, they often cling onto the outside, don't they?
I know, yeah. So it would have been horrific to see. Obviously, I'm not going to play a video of that, but it was the deadliest in 20 years. Here we have this.
Yes.
So secretive units tackling COVID disinformation strayed towards censorship, and all of this information about government departments and military units using behavioral manipulation techniques to basically manipulate people to do what the government says. Again, sort of when people were unaware of this going on. So it was sort of covert behavioral manipulation, which is what made it so egregious.
They're also spying on people like Molly Kingsley of Us For Them, who were just campaigning to reopen schools.
Yeah. I mean, come on. Reopening schools is worthy of being spied on.
I mean, schools are bad enough, but at the same time, this was just a concerned parent who was saying, well, my child is being developmentally stunted by being kept at home for a disease that they're not at risk of.
And people question me in why I hate the government. Here's a great example of many, many examples. So another story is this.
Yes.
And Neuralink began human trials, so you could get a chip in your brain.
How's yours going?
It malfunctions quite a lot. You can hear it, sometimes. It goes zzz. But yes, you had a particular bee in your bonnet about this, Connor, didn't you?
Yeah, I am slightly concerned that the technology will be developed to first increase accessibility for people with disabilities or cognitive impairment, and then it will ratchet up to becoming somewhat mandatory because you can only conduct your business meetings in the metaverse. It's just like how you can only have a job if you have a mobile phone, for example. Just slightly worrying how quickly the technology is coming along. I don't want to take the brain chip. Thank you very much.
No, I don't think it's for me, although, I just like to see technology progressing. And if it can help people with like neurodegenerative disorders to walk again, then that's good. But, if it goes to a mass market, it's a little bit scary. Like, imagine your brain being hacked, getting like a virus in your head.
Well, this is what the Yuval Noah Harari has talked about as WEF address.
I hate that, man.
Well, speaking about covert behavioral nudge units, if it does become remotely accessible, what's to stop them from soliciting a dopamine response anytime that you do something that they want you to do? Because then your motivation becomes indistinguishable from what the government wants you to do because they're hacking your neurochemistry. Like, no thanks.
Well, thankfully, at least at a neurological point of view, this goes on the outside of the brain, and the dopaminergic system is quite close to the brain stem. So
there was
very difficult.
There was one that had an entire mesh net over the entirety of it. The
I don't know how feasible it is. I suppose the technology doesn't exist yet, so we'll have to find out. But it is something to keep an eye on. Well, it's a bit dystopian and scary. And talking of dystopian and scary, here is something to do with US government spending. This is Biden signing the debt ceiling bill, which pulled the US from the brink of default because they have been spending lots of American taxpayers' money on frivolous things. And of course, the US government likes running a deficit. And to be honest, the point at which the US government is most effective is when it's in a government shutdown in these sorts of scenarios, when it's actually doing nothing. That's when it does its best work, I think. But yes, this happened. And of course, US debt is going to get higher and higher.
Well, they're never going to be able to service their debt because it outpaces their economy. So
it does, yeah.
We'll have fun when the collapse comes, I suppose.
So Twitter chose to confront Brussels over disinformation code of conduct, which signaled an even further part from the Elon-run Twitter, now X, platform. And our global overlords, I suppose, because of course they want to impose their ideology on people. And Elon, although he has some ideology that he's happy to impose on people, is at least more resistant than most
They see
to it.
platforms like Twitter as an avenue of narrative control. I mean, Harry and I last October went through the Intercept expose, where they looked into the Biden administration pressuring various Silicon Valley giants, particularly Vijaya Gad over at Twitter, to censor random Anthony Fauci parody accounts for vaccine misinformation. And of course, we know all about the Hunter Biden laptop story, where the FBI made up the intelligence services letter to say it's Russian disinformation, even though they knew it wasn't, and told Facebook, Google, Twitter, etc., to censor the story, and it helped win Biden the election.
Mm-hmm. Tucker's first show on Twitter came out, which had 121.7 million views as of the 1st of December, our time of recording, which is incredibly impressive. That's much further reach than he would have got on Fox. So this is just testament to the fact that he made a good decision, however involuntary it might have been, to leave Fox. And he's clearly met a lot of success here. It's nearly got 1 million people liking it. I mean, there's 250,000 people sharing it.
He's also
That is
no longer
huge.
muzzled.
Exactly.
You can't underestimate that.
As I mentioned when we started, I think it's been basically nothing but good that he's done this, because, like you say, he's not muzzled and he's signal boosting not just his own stories that he covers, but other people's stories as well.
Occasionally, he should be more prudent who he invites on. I mean, the Andrew Tate one was a bloody car crash, because Tate just made things up, and also he's not a very reputable character. But I don't blame Tucker for wanting to speak to contentious figures.
Well, that was the first, I think that was within the first few episodes that he did, but since maybe episode 6 or 7, he's been consistently getting better and better with each episode, covering interesting and relevant things. And once again, interviews with people like Dave Smith is always really good to see, because he is somebody who was a real mainstay of the mainstream, who is very willing to go out and speak to alternative media platforms and boost them. And he's featured Oren McIntyre. And that was when he was on Fox.
And Raw Egg Nationalist.
Oh yeah, and Rory.
It's just brilliant. I love that.
So one of the most harrowing things is this California bill, which would punish parents who don't affirm. Oh, I can't scroll down. It's changing the bill, but basically it punishes parents who don't affirm the child's gender identity. And this was passed in September, but proposed on the 8th of June. So yeah, this sort of spelled the ever sort of worsening descent into madness that California is going through.
I spoke to Billboard Chris about this. It's Washington, Oregon, and California, and I think there's one more, have become transgender sanctuary states, where the state will claim ownership of your child if the parents are non-affirming. And Chris told me an absolutely harrowing story of where the government wrestled away a young girl from her mother because the young girl was identifying as trans. She started taking hormone-based therapy and then knelt down in front of a train, and her mother had to identify her body. So that is what the government is currently doing to children in California.
That is just, I didn't know about that. That's one of the most harrowing things I've probably ever heard.
Yeah, Chris tells these case studies far better than I do, so you can go and see my interview with him on the website.
It's not going to get much better either, because, of course, you had the Anansi stabbings. This was a man from the Middle East who tried to claim asylum in France, and I think he got rejected and just started stabbing children in a park. It's horrific. I don't really know what to say here. It's just so harrowing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an endless carousel of the controlled demolition of peace and prosperity. And it's totally needless, totally avoidable, but yet it is foisted on us anyway.
Much more harrowing is this. Muslims and Christians unite, trampling the radical trans pride flag in the streets of Ottawa. And this was a rare moment of solidarity between Christians and Muslims against the woke agenda, because it was being forced on children in schools. And, over the past couple of years, it's been nice to see the Canadians standing up to this sort of thing, because they tend to be a bit more progressive in general than the Americans, at least. So well done, I suppose.
No legislative victories yet, but especially not because, as I spoke to Chris about this, the Canadian Conservative Party voted overwhelmingly for the conversion therapy ban bill,
this story made me laugh. Paris needs to learn to live with rats. The mayor of Paris conceded, which I thought was funny. I'm pretty sure, was it Glasgow or was it Edinburgh? I can't remember. A Scottish city, I think it was Glasgow, said a similar thing.
City Hall forms committee to look into cohabiting with vermin, and they also try to solve the rat problem on the side.
I was going to make a similar joke. You stole my thunder. Great minds, though, right? So I found this story quite interesting. It's not something we covered, but I did consider it. 4 children were found alive after surviving in the Amazon for 40 days after a plane crash in Colombia, which I thought was very impressive, surviving in the Amazon jungle.
I do find one of the top stories that next to it, though, quite funny. Food we eat matters for climate, leaders agree in first ever pledge. Implying that, what do they have to eat to survive?
Has it never mattered for climate before?
Mm-hmm.
Agriculture and farming has never been something that impacts the environment or climate. Okay.
By the way, these children were aged 13, 9, and 4.
Blimey.
That's impressive.
That's impressive.
Fair play to him.
Talking of impressive, Silvio Berlusconi, known for his
Bunga Bunga parties.
That's the one. Died, aged 86, and lots of the mainstream media thought that it was the perfect opportunity to, as the Independent has done here, bring up all of his scandals immediately after he died, plagued by tax fraud and bunga bunga sex scandals. Perhaps not the most tasteful thing to do, but
he was guilty of one thing and one thing only, being
and it's
Italian.
Probably one of the best crimes, tax fraud. Oh, right. Being Italian. Oh, yeah. That too. Yeah.
He died as he lived, deep in a hole.
Blimey. So, the UN said that gender bias had not improved over the past decade.
Oh, good news.
And referred to 90% of men worldwide as being sexist against women. One has to look. One has to wonder what the UN were thinking. Just like, how do we get people to agree with us? Well, say 90% of these people are a word that has some sort of stigma attached to it.
Yeah, but they know they're going to get paid by all of our countries anyway, so they face absolutely no repercussions for just making things up.
I'm going to be presumably the only metric for holding biased attitudes towards women would be acknowledging that men and women have different attitudes and behaviors.
Mm-hmm. So on the 19th of June, Australia voted as to whether there would be an Aboriginal parliament, which is ridiculous. Obviously, they voted to reject it. And yes, it was obviously just a way of inserting the sort of, we're on Indigenous land, but, Australia's massive and it's not really, most people live in a very concentrated area on the East Coast. So that argument doesn't really hold up. And it's nice to see that Australia rejected it. There's still some sense on that prison island, I suppose, and I'm very thankful for it because many Australians do not deserve such a thing. So, of course, this was a big story. The missing Titanic submersible, and of course...
This was a rather tragic ending for this one.
It was, yes. Lots of people died in the submarine. Many of them were,
well,
fathers and
5 of them, and one was, a pair of them was a father and a son, and the son... Tragically, it turned out, had only been on the craft in the first place to make his dad happy because he was nervous and didn't want to go on. So, rather harrowing.
Yeah, and supposedly it got to a certain depth and then just instantly imploded. So I suppose the one mercy is that it was a sudden thing, although it does sound pretty horrendous, if I'm being honest. Estonia became the first ex-Soviet state to legalize same-sex marriage, and yeah, I was actually quite surprised that there hadn't been more, to be honest. But there we go. Of course, this was a huge story as well, that Wagner Group began its march on Moscow and, of course, halted it. And then mysteriously, the leader, Prigozhin, gets shot down in his plane under circumstances that I find dubious, but weren't really looked into.
Was it explosive on board, if I remember correctly, is what they theorized it was?
There were all sorts of theories, weren't there? That was the sort of predominant one.
Now he's tending to the big hot dog stand in the sky.
Mm-hmm. And finally,
some say that he's still out there and the whole thing was a false flag and he's not actually dead. So
yes, some say.
Some say he probably is, but dead, that is.
Who knows? And finally, this happened on the 28th of June. This was the I suppose, the 17-year-old Muslim who tried to run over police in a routine traffic stop and was shot, causing massive riots in Paris, largely by the migrant population, North African Muslims in particular. Such things as attacking random Frenchmen in the street, co-opting vehicles, burning things down, graffitiing on Holocaust memorials, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, breaking into AMTs with bandsaws, throwing explosives at police stations, mostly peaceful activities.
Mm-hmm. And that's a somewhat dark view of June. A lot of bad stuff happened in June, it seems. But yes, I suppose that's everything.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com and check out the merch store. And you can check out things such as the Dirty Dirty Smear Merchant shirt, which has been brought back for a limited time. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.